Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today we're going to learn how to create a 1980s chrome text effect in Photoshop. Now, a couple of assumptions I need to get out of the way right off the bat. Number one, I am using Photoshop CC 2018. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am using Windows. So if you're using a Mac, when I say hit the Control key on the keyboard, that's the Command key. And when I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard, that's the Options key. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started by hitting Control N on the keyboard to bring up our new image dialog box. And let's name this 1980s Chrome text, because we're making 1980s Chrome text effects. The width that we're using is 3,840 pixels, height of 2,160 pixels, resolution 150 pixels per inch, RGB color 8-bit, background doesn't matter, we're going to change that. Under advanced options here, our color profile is going to be sRGB and our pixel aspect ratio square pixels. Let's hit create and we're ready to begin. Now the first thing that we need to do is we need to get our background to be editable. So you just want to double click on that. That'll bring up the new layer dialog box, and you just want to name this, let's name this gradient, because that's what we're going to be putting on this. Everything else can stay the same. Hit OK, and we now have our layer ready for its gradient. Next thing that we need to do is we need to get our foreground and background colors to the colors of our gradient. So I'm going to use a nice bluish to black kind of fade from the center, a very deep blue to a very, let's say a very dark gray instead of black. So let's do our foreground color here. Let's make that, let's see, 072 D36. There we go. So this nice kind of deep, rich, kind of bluish look. Let's hit OK, and then let's click on our background here, and let's make that, let's see, how about 0C, 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 this nice deep dark gray down there, almost black. Okay, then what we want to do is we want to go to our gradient tool, that's G on the keyboard, so click on G, and you'll see up here under the options for it, what we want to have here is the foreground to background, so make sure that that is selected because that will give you your foreground color to the background color. You want to make sure that you're on radial, which is this guy right here. Mode is normal, opacity is 100, reverse is unchecked, dither and transparency are checked. Go somewhere near the middle, click somewhere, and then let go out here. Now you can hold down shift and that'll constrain it to a straight line. You don't have to, you can just let this go, but if you hold down shift, it'll constrain it to a straight line or a 45-degree angle line or straight up and down. Just bring it out over here, let go, and you now have this nice looking kind of gradient. Now I have a link in the description below where you can download any images that I'm going to tell you about or any fonts that I'll be using, but you don't have to do this next little step. I happen to like it. It makes it look a little bit older and a little grungier, more 1980s-ish, and that is find yourself a nice texture, throw that texture on top of this, and then this will look a little bit more beat up, a little bit more 80s-ish. So like I said, I have a link in the description below to the image that I'll be using to throw up on here, and it's kind of a marbly texture, which is this guy right here. Now, I'm going to make this fill the screen like so, see that? And then what you need to do, once it's in there and resize to fill your entire screen, you'll see that you're covering up your gradient. What you really want to do is you need to set this layer to multiply and opacity of 50%. So let's go over here to multiply, and let's change our opacity here to only 50%. So let's make this 50, like so. And then what we want to do is we want to get rid of any colors that are in this, because you don't want to affect the actual color of the gradient. You want the gradient to stay the color that it is. And the way that we're going to do that for this, now there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. I'm going to use it. I'm going to do this by using a HueSaturation adjustment layer. Now you can just do this straight to the image itself, to the layer that you've got by hitting Control U. Okay, and that will bring up this HueSaturation options box, and then you just grab the saturation, bring that all the way down to -100, hit OK, and we now have a black and white texture on top of our gradient that is under multiply, so that it is giving us this nice look over here for our background. Now both of these layers are going to be our background. It's just something to put our text upon. So let's select both of them by holding down shift and selecting either the top or the bottom, and that will select both of them. You start with the bottom one, hit shift, and you get the top one. Or if you start at the top one and hold shift and click on the bottom one, you get both. Then hit Control G on the keyboard to group them, then double click on group, name that background, and we now have our background. Next thing that we need to do is we're going to put in our text. And this is really just one big text object with a lot of layer styles on top of it. There's no other tricks to this. It's really just layer styles. So let's go to our text tool, which is T on the keyboard. Okay, and as you can see, I'm using a font called Afia. You can download that. I have a link in the description below, or you can use any fairly thick font. It works with thicker fonts that look 1980s future retro-ish kind of look to them. So blocky and thick. I'm using regular, and what we want to do, let's go over here to character. We want to make our AFA font, we want to make this about 200. Let's see, and our kerning, we want to have that at 25. The color doesn't matter. We're going to be changing that anyway. So once we have that, we're just going to click here, and then we're going to put in our text, Pixel Magic, as I always do. Then we're going to go back to our move tool. We no longer need this. V on the keyboard, and we're just going to put this right in the center of our document, like so. Yes. So there we have our text. Now it's hard to see, but again, that doesn't matter. We're going to be putting gradients on top of this so that it will have a nice, cool effect to it. So the font color does not matter. Okay, so like I said, all we're going to be doing here is putting on some layer styles. So let's get right to it. Go down here to layer styles. Let's start with bevel and emboss. Okay, now the first thing that we need to do here is we want it to be a stroke emboss. So you won't see anything happen until we apply a stroke in a few more steps. So stroke emboss, technique is chisel hard, depth is going to be 100, direction is up, size is going to be 10, soften is going to be 0. Okay, angle is going to be at 135. Now remember, use global light, uncheck that, we never use it. Altitude is 40 degrees. The gloss contour that we're using is this guy right here, which is actually called steep slope jagged. Now if you don't see that in your options down here, then you want to go over here to the sprocket, click on that, go up to contours down here all the way to the bottom, click on that, and then you'll see replace current contours with contours from contours, hit OK, and then you'll see all of these. Okay, and the one that we're looking for is this guy right here, which is our steep slope jagged. Okay, make sure our anti-alias is unchecked. Highlight mode is going to be screen. The color that we're using here is white, which is all Fs. Opacity is going to be 55%. Shadow mode is multiply. We're using black, which is all zeros. Opacity is going to be 75%. Then we want to go over here to contour. Okay, and the contour that we're looking for is going to be this guy right here, which is our cone. Yes. Anti-alias is unchecked. Range is going to be 50%. Okay, next thing that we're going to do is give it the stroke that we were just talking about, because it's a stroke, bevel, and emboss. So we're going to put on a stroke. And the size that we're looking for is 15. Position is going to be center. Blend mode is normal. Opacity is 100%. Overprint is unchecked. Fill type is gradient. And the gradient that we're looking for is this guy. Now you can't see him under your regular gradient. So if you don't see it, you got to go over here to the sprocket, go down to metals, click on metals, replace current gradients with the gradients for metals, hit OK. And then we're looking for this guy right here, which is blue, or steel blue. Okay, then you want reverse is unchecked, align with layer is checked, style is reflected, angle is going to be 90 degrees, scale is going to be 100%. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is we want to give this 3 inner shadows. Okay, now you can see I already have my inner shadows set up, 1, 2, and 3. Now if you don't have 3 of them, which you should not at this point, you just want to click on this little plus next to inner shadow, and that will add on more shadows. So let's start with the top one right here, the first one up on the top. The blend mode is going to be normal. The color that we're using is black, which is all zeros. Opacity is 100%. Angle is going to be 135. Remember, use global light is off. Uncheck that. Distance is going to be 10. Choke is 0. Size is 15. Contour is linear, which is the very first one right over here. It's the default. Anti-alias is unchecked. Noise is going to be 0. The second inner shadow down here is going to be basically the same. It's going to be a blend mode of overlay. The color again is going to be black, which is all zeros. Opacity 100%. Angle of 90 degrees. Use global light is unchecked. Distance 25. Choke 0. Size 25. Contour linear. Anti-alias unchecked. And noise is 0. The third and last inner shadow is going to be a blend mode of hard light. The color that we're using is going to be white, which is all Fs. Opacity is going to be 75%. Angle is negative 90 degrees. Use global light unchecked, of course. Distance is 25. Choke is 0. Size is 25. Contour is going to be linear. Anti-alias is unchecked. Noise is going to be 0. And as you can see, it's starting to look pretty cool. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is we're going to give it a gradient overlay. We're actually going to go with 2 gradient overlays. So if you don't see 2 of them, just click on the plus and then you'll have 2. So the topmost one that we're going to do is going to be a blend mode of overlay. Dither is checked. Opacity is 70%. We're going to have to change the gradient itself, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So reverse is unchecked. Align with layer is checked. Style is linear. Angle is 90 degrees. Scale is 100%. Now on the gradient, you want to click once on the gradient itself like so, and that will bring up our gradient editor. And what we're looking for over here, we're going to start at the top. You see this nub right here? You've probably only got 2 of them, one here and one here, and they're both black. That's because if you click on it, what you'll see is opacity is 100%, location is 0. Now what we want to do is make the opacity here 0, and then over here on this side, at 100% location, we also want to make that 0. Then you want to click somewhere up in the middle, click once, and you'll create a new one that will be opacity 0, location something, somewhere around the 50s. What you want to do is you want to make that location of 50 and opacity of 100%. Okay, then what we need to do is on the bottom where you've got one color on this side and one color on this side, you just want to click on the first one and you want to make that, let's get rid of that. You want to make the first one a color of pure black, which is all zeros, and you want to give that a location of 50. Then you want to click on the one that's all the way over here on the right, okay, and you want to make that a color of white, all Fs. Okay, and you want to give it a location of 51. That way they are next to each other. It's a hard line. As you can see, there is now a hard line here of white on top, black on bottom. Okay, once we have that, we are done with that gradient overlay, and then we'll work on the second gradient overlay. The second gradient overlay is going to be a blend mode of normal. Dither is checked, opacity of 100%, and this is a custom gradient also, so we'll come back to that. Reverse is unchecked. Align with layer is checked. Linear is the style that we're looking for. Angle is going to be 90. Scale is 100%. Then click on the gradient here, and all we need to do is change the 2 colors. Now on the left and the right on the top, it should be at location 100 at 100% and location 0 at 100% opacity. The bottom 2, this one is going to be at location 25%. Color is going to be this kind of fuchsia pink, which is AD02C6. Okay, and over here at 75%, we're going to make that color a nice rich blue, which is going to be 2A87F9. Okay, now that we've got all of that, we're going to hit OK. We're done with our gradient overlays. The next thing that we need to do is we are now going to go with our last bit, which is on outer glow, just to give it kind of a cool outer glow to make it look like it's kind of shining in the space light. So blend mode is going to be screen, opacity is going to be 40%, noise is going to be at 2%. The color that we're using is a very light blue, which is C1E9FF. Okay, and the technique is softer. Spread is going to be 5%. Size is 40 pixels. Contour is linear. Anti-alias is unchecked. Range is going to be at 50%. Jitter at 0%. And we now have our final product. And as you can see, it looks really cool. It kind of reminds you of those 1980s video games or posters that had that kind of space-agey chrome look to the text. And that's what we were going for. Now, I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. Once again, this is Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.